July 2004 in Bristol Bay County. Since 1970, I've fished commercially in Alaska. I adore being outdoors and hunting. After fishing, I try to travel upriver with a buddy or two to relax before going home. This year, I went in Alaska's interior to photograph images of bears to advertise a new bear watching and sports fishing company. During our 5-day journey, we saw more than 40 bears, and I shot hundreds of photos of them and their footprints. It caused me and my buddies a feeling of unease. This track's immense size and human-like form set it apart from the others. I stepped beside it. I'm wearing size 13 boots. Whatever made this track was so heavy, heavier than the biggest bear, that it pushed the gravel so far into the earth that we truly speculated what we were looking at. Other pictures we took of bear tracks were nowhere near that indentation that this track had left. One of the most intriguing things about this track is that there were no visible claw marks, unlike all the other bear tracks. We both felt nervous in our surroundings and observed all day. That night at camp we didn't have much to chat about. We've never heard or smelt anything strange. I'm not sure what we observed and am just stating my opinion. I've only heard one other tale from a local hermit. He described a towering, two-legged monster that observed him for 30 minutes from 200 feet distant, across the river. He was immobile and stared at him when seen. The hairy guy turned and went away. We reached Kennicott. It became too late for us to reach the glacier campgrounds. We chose the first available campsite. We located an off-trail place. So we established camp, put our stuff under a tree down the route, and are eating a little dinner. I headed to a path to smoke. I thought I saw a biker coming down the path after a few minutes. When I glanced back, it was still there. I looked closer for a face or bike. It wasn't a human till then. Large black shape with legs spread. So I thought it was a cyclist. The bear's arms were curled at its side and its legs were too far apart. I summoned my companion, but when I went back to look, it was gone. The following day, we discovered no trail signs. Everyone who hears my tale thinks I'm insane. Thanks. I see. Probably. I hope someone listens. My hunting companion and I were on a ridge, 1,000 yards from a wide clearing, waiting for caribou. While we waited for caribou to emerge from the undergrowth, we saw a big gray animal stroll between two enormous spruce trees. We're both longtime Alaskan hunters who've recorded countless North American hunts. I've hunted deer, elk, black and grizzly bear throughout North America. I've never seen such a strange animal. We watched it go across the clearing for 30 minutes. We lost sight of the caribou, as it disappeared into deep undergrowth. We'd never heard of Bigfoot in Alaska, but we told our bush pilot we'd seen something unusual. He said we'd probably seen the hairy guy, a local species. My friends and I were bored in December, so I suggested we go into the woods behind my home. I didn't think much of it since we'd done it before. We left at 11 o'clock at night when it was dark but moonlit. Wintertime meant frigid temperatures. We strolled on moose paths and musher, runner, and cross-country skier routes. On our 2-mile walk from my home to another entrance, we chatted about Bigfoot and UFOs. One buddy smoked as we reached the main bridge. On the way back, we heard a wild dog barking and sped up. We kept chatting about it as we went. Then I knew something was following, testing, and bothering us. Before I forgot. Warren was clumsy, I thought. I believed he was sliding, but something was hurling at us. This was halfway back, I realized. When I asked Warren whether he kept sliding, he believed I was joking. We listened carefully. When I alerted the others something was wrong, we halted and shined a spotlight about, hearing footsteps and broken branches. When I said I wasn't joking, the leader assumed I was. He walked behind me as snowballs almost struck us. When we were halfway out of the woods, we heard dogs barking, trees snapping, and somebody hurling items at us. By 3:30 am, we departed. I didn't go home since I didn't know whether it was following us. I realized this wasn't a joke since the snow was over 5 feet thick in the woods, making it difficult to pull off. In February 2004, along a power line east of Anchorage's Potter Marsh, my 2 buddies and I were bored one night, so we went snowmobiling north of my home, even though it's banned in Anchorage. We left at 11 night, rode a quarter mile, then cut into the trails. Snowed 10 inches. It had snowed recently, so there were no traces. After a half hour of guiding, we paused and spoke. We started off again and followed a game route to a clearing. I rode into the holes with my pals 50 yards behind me. I came over a hill and found weird footprints going to a location in the snow where something had fallen down. I thought it was a moose, but I followed the footprints over the next hill and saw a Bigfoot. It was 10 to 12 feet away and going the other direction. Fearful, I jammed on the brakes. It ran away, leapt over a snowy log, and went into the woods. I was shocked and worried, so I immediately rode back to my buddies. I met them at the first mountain, told them to leave, and rode back to my home. When I informed them near my home, they laughed and said it was probably a bear or someone in the woods, but I was sure it wasn't. The way it ran through the snow convinced me it wasn't human. For a long time, everyone called me insane, so I don't enjoy talking about it. I was traveling south on Auburn Drive towards Farmers Loop in Fairbanks, Alaska, in July 2009. It was a woody, inhabited region with residences. On average, houses are 100 to 200 feet apart. The area around the residences was removed. Pearl Creek Elementary School's road is forested. The forests hide the school. In some spots, you can't see more than 10 or 15 feet into the trees. In this region, though, it had been cleaned up and sight lines were clear. The school and vegetable garden were visible from the road I was on as I headed home at 6 p.m. after installing a deck. Sunny weather prevailed. I saw a guy standing 100 yards ahead on the right side of the road. Unconsciously, I guess. A guy standing beside the road isn't uncommon here. As I drew closer, I peered carefully at the snowman. He dashes through the woods toward the school in 1 or 2 seconds. He reacted like a frightened animal. I didn't stop until I saw him enter the woods. I saw him sprint away from the road, then turn left and run parallel to the road in the same direction I was going. I saw his back, not his face. If I wasn't so entranced, I could have seen his face. I was distracted. His hair was 3 to 4 inches long, his whole body. It was rust red. It was crimson, but rusty, which surprised me. 6 feet tall, he took 200 pounds. He ran oddly hopped. 1 foot he pushed off with was more than a conventional running action, but the other foot drove him higher and ahead. I followed him into the woods. I ran 100 yards to a road so I could turn right, then right again 20 yards later to the school parking lot. He must be on the forested peninsula he was in. The trees I was gazing into from that angle were fairly dense, and I didn't see him. I haven't seen him since a school garden on the right had people in it at 7 to 10, and I regret not stopping to speak to them about it. I drove to work on the deck the following day. When a couple walking their dogs approached, I slowed down and observed him stopped and examining the area. I flagged them down and told them what occurred the night before. They said that a week before, they were there with their dogs and on their way to the soccer field when 3 youngsters asked whether they'd seen Sasquatch. They reported a dad who didn't seem thrilled was among them. It was either genuine or a guy in an extremely convincing suit, that's my judgment. I reported it to the Fairbanks Fish and Game Office. A couple of days later, the guy accepting the complaint rolled his eyes while jotting it down on scratch paper. I had to give him my number in case. Not me. A non-commissioned officer I know was on his way home with his wife, kid, and hunting companion when a giant hairy ape-like creature crossed the road in front of them. Nobody knows about Bigfoot. They claim it crossed a 35-foot wide road and 4 to 5 stairs and vanished into the bush on the other side, leading to the China River. Both men have been hunting since childhood and recognize a bear when they see one. The bear crossed the road on its hind legs, and we all agreed, well, a bear can stand on its hind legs and take a few awkward steps, but not a 35-foot road. Yes. They said they looked for traces afterwards. Unsure? But he noticed footprints that weren't recognizable. They were pigeon-toed, or pointed inwards. They heard or saw nothing else and went home a little shaken. The occurrence on a military base appeared unbelievable. Men fear ridicule, therefore I don't want them engaged. This occurred in late August 1997 in a side valley of Goldstream Valley, a moderately populous region just north of Fairbanks. Wild side valleys remain. 1,000 years ago, I hunted ruffed grouse here. I won't say. I'd searched all day and evening on a south-facing aspen-covered mountainside and planned to spend the night there. A black bear nearly walked into me as I made camp. I heard him far off and frightened him away. This will become clear later. I slept without a tent beneath a spruce tree. Midnight, I was startled by something roaming about my tent about 30 feet away. My father was a hunting guide, so I grew up hunting bears. It walked on 2 legs with a shuffling sound between each stride, like a bear. It seemed slow. The forest floor's dry leaves broke several branches. I could clearly hear and track it. I've spent a lot of time in the Alaskan bush and have never been truly afraid of anything I've encountered, but on that particular night, I was literally shaking with fear. Whatever it was circled my camp for what seemed like hours, but it was probably only 5 minutes before I remembered something I read about Indian beliefs regarding woodsmen. I said in a trembling voice that I wanted no difficulty that night. Talking to a creature may seem corny, but it works. The following morning, I didn't search for footprints, hair, etc. I've restarted hunting. The woodsman caused no additional problems. I remember hearing a low murmuring sound as it prowled. Since reading about Bigfoot sightings, I found that many folks mentioned a bad stench. I didn't smell anything bad. Most Alaskan natives have legends about the woodsman, bushman, or hairy man. I've never heard of anybody else meeting a woodsman in Alaska. I was part of a group of around a dozen Army soldiers training in the region. We were tented at Tree Line near Black Rapids Glacier, Alaska Richardson Highway south of Delta Junction, on a warm, clear day in the summer. I was gazing across the adjacent valley when I observed activity on a steep slope with bare rocky surface and snowfields descending the Little Gullies. A half-mile distant, you could tell through the snow that it wasn't a bear. It strode with big steps and swinging arms through the snow. It was bare black. I've seen bears in the same terrain subsequently and they don't move like this. Bears can walk upright, but only for short distances when they need to see or smell something. They don't go in such rough terrain. We observed it till it was out of the snow and no longer visible. Rocks made visibility poor. Everyone was afraid to gaze at the tracks. No one was allowed outdoors after dark the following day. Never again? After 20 years. Even armed, I wouldn't go up there. Only Bigfoot descriptions resembled this.